Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we work to bring you people talking about all kinds of interesting things in terms of how they see the world and how they can make improvements in their communities locally, globally, and digitally. Now, our club, the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, is one of 36,000 Rotary clubs around the world. The organization, Rotary International, with the motto Service Above Self, has 1.2 million Rotarians and another 200,000 Rotaractors around the world working together to make things just a little bit better. And we love to see that happen in really innovative ways. And so we try to bring you stories of people who are making that happen that way. Now, you may remember from some months ago a presentation by Casper Meyer, who is also with us today, on gaming theory and how it can make a difference in how government responds to different kinds of needs. And today we're going to continue that conversation with Abeer Kapoor. Now, Abeer, you read his biography as you were coming into the recording for our meeting, and I will leave more details to him, but he is in New Delhi. He is the founder of the Civic Games Lab, and you're going to hear a lot about the wonderful projects that they have been doing on all sorts of topics. And so I am excited. Abeer, it is such a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and I hand the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Rashtan. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Casper, for introducing me to the Silicon Valley Rotary Club. And it's truly been an exciting way to think about my work, also to present it to a brand new audience, and to also talk about what all we're doing in India, which is going through a series of interesting changes, churning, and also a march towards using newer methodologies towards for change and social change. Now, coming to this question about, can games or game-led learning, can it bring social change? Can it spur active citizenship? Can it help us build an understanding of vocabulary or solutions to some of the most pressing problems, such as climate change, malnutrition, the threat to democratic values, a free market, the erosion of digital rights? Can games help us build a vocabulary of these solutions? Can they spur active citizenship? I firmly believe that they can. And games are this unique methodology that marries storytelling, the social sciences, film, multimedia, interaction, art into this cohesive product that can reach a million lives at once. It can help foster communities. It can help foster change. It can help foster so much and it is an untapped methodology. It is not being used at scale. It is not being used across the world in the way it can. And there are several examples of games being used to spur a lot of social change. One small example is Pokemon Go. And I urge everyone to look at Pokemon Go, which is an AR augmented reality game on your phone, where you can train your camera onto any road, any street, and see a Pokemon. So several cities which had dying suburbs, or where the commerce had vanished from there, started tying up with Pokemon Go and putting rare Pokemons in those parts of the city, actually leading to footfalls and heavier traffic into businesses on those paths. So this idea of social gaming has great depth. Now, the question is, what is the potential, or how can we move forward? But before that, in order to understand how games can be used, we also have to understand that they are an essential part of storytelling. Now, there is a long sort of tussle between the ludologists and the narratologists. Now, it's a so the ludologists who believe in games in the puritanical method, that they should not be looked at stories. They should just be seen as a series of rules and mechanics that are looking at each other or interacting on a board. While narratologists believe that this is the second coming of the story, that the promise to reshape the spectrum of narrative expression, not by replacing the novel or movie, but by continuing the timeless bardic work within another framework. So this promises a newer landscape of storytelling. I borrowed this quote from a book called Games and Storytelling by Souvik Mukherjee, who is an Indian academic. Now, why have I talked about narratologists or storytelling? Because I believe that each culture across the world is trying to occupy its mind through games and has historically. And they have found different ways to do it. The Maldives have a different set of games. India has a different set of games. The US has a different set of games. China has a different set of games. So, how we've used that historically to not only occupy boredom, but also fill learning into it. Like the oldest games of Go and chess were used to train samurai. And the Buddhists used snakes and ladders, which is a Indian game, to provide moral didactic learning. So that usage of storytelling and its linkage to moral education stretches past into, well, before the modern era, or even prehistoric times. We've always built games. The game of Ur has was something that was taught to teach business, to teach trade, to also a lot of commerce happened from it. And there's a lovely video from the British Museum that shows how the world's oldest game Ur can be played. Now, I truly believe that each culture is holding within itself its language of gaming, or its verbs of interaction. And we need to tap into these to now urgently present a new methodology to provide a vocabulary of change as the world confronts so many wicked problems unlike ever before. So we at the Civic Games Lab try to do that. We try to identify and build a vocabulary of Indian gaming through our own language, through our own verbs. And we've been doing this for the past 4 years, and we've developed a series of games that are trying to provide education on some of the most pressing issues in the Indian ecosystem or social framework. The first game that we built was the Pole, which was a game that allowed us to travel the length and breadth of the country, supported, and we got very lucky to be supported by the Frederick Naumann Foundation, which is a liberal organization, and those are the values that we carry forward. So through the Pole, which is a game that puts regular people, young kids, women, who have been left out by the political process, by left who do not have access to party politics in India, uh, it gives them a simulation to run their own political party. And what it does, it centers the process of a manifesto, because there are elections anywhere in the world are the largest problem solving exercise. What they are is that politicians across the world need to understand the problems of the citizenry and provide solutions to that. It is a transactional relationship. But because of the history of how politics has been enmeshed with business, with feudal orders, with religion, with populism, a lot of that transaction is one-sided. So what we wanted to do was provide a vocabulary to help young students in schools and colleges, and low income schools and colleges, or in disenfranchised groups, to understand that selecting a politician is very similar to buying a shoe. You do your research, you test it out, you make a decision to buy the one which is the best: Adidas, Nike, Puma, New Balance. You make that choice, you give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you change it. And that's the sort of vocabulary that we want to give them. So in the Pole, young people, understand the issues of their constituencies across India. There are 545. Then what they do is they draft their own manifesto. And drafting is a game mechanic. So we use those languages to build those connections. Then they campaign, use money, manpower, manipulation. They can spread fake news, and we push them to do morally dubious things. And the most interesting aspect is it also shows the difference in culture. So Indians across the country deal with money, manpower, favors very differently. So women who have not got access to politics take care of a game so carefully. They argue, they genuinely look through the issues, while men who have access to politics are dismissive towards this methodology. While young kids in the state of Maharashtra and Bombay are deeply argumentative, while in UP, which is a state with lots history of mafia and manpower and muscle, are very open with bribing each other. So it revealed these ways that the Indian democracy is extremely different. And then a group of young German students played it, who played it according to the rules and read the lines and nothing in between. And they played for 5 hours because they couldn't read into the subcontext. So it showed us how democracy changes from region to region. Then, so we played this game with 7,500 people. We were on BBC, we were on CNN, we were seen as a way to understand the Indian elections. We were traveling into low income schools and setting up student councils, especially in girls' schools where democracy is such a distant concept. And young girls coming up to us and saying, do you really believe I can become a politician? And we had to deal with that disbelief. So when in 2020 we all got locked down, and India had deeply brutal lockdown where we were not allowed outside, our ways of being went online. And when those went online, we were faced with and confronted by the first time where we're all going online. There is no one giving you a warning sign about how technology erodes your digital rights. While technology is deeply important, how does it impact your rights? So we found ourselves with Indians moving online, not without a warning, not without anything, because we have no other alternatives. They're finding love online. They're moving, they're trying to educate themselves. They're trying to order food, medicines, all of that. But they don't understand, again, that transaction. When you open an account, what happens? So it became our we again, supported by the Frederick Naumann Foundation, built a series of games called the Stories of Antarjal Nagar, where we had a game on fake news, we had a game on queer experiences online, we had a game on where we used Mario to teach young women who were talking, inspired by the Me Too movement or by social activism, to protect their data and their profiles online, because they would get trolled, they would get doxxed, their personal data would get put up online, and they would face harassment both in the offline and the online world. So it started becoming very important to educate activists, journalists, young college girls on how they can protect themselves, how they can ensure that the nastiness of the online doesn't follow them home. uh, Especially, and with queer experiences, we told the story of a young queer boy who finds love online, but it turns out to be a bully from his school. And we followed stories and examples from personal anecdotes. We put together a chat in the game, which we crowdsourced from young people under the promise of anonymity, to teach people that this is what happens. So we wanted to say that queer stories are everyone's stories. So we built it out like that. And the last game that we built was on the freedom of expression, which follows the story of a journalist who's trying to uncover a scam. And it's set in Antarjal Nagar, which is Hindi for internet town. So we believe that social formations like Hogwarts, like Narnia, they provide you a space of learning. And India is an oral storytelling game society which believes in storytelling. So now we're building all of these games out as children's books to teach young kids about digital rights. The last game that I would like to talk about, because I think I'm close to the 12-minute mark, which is our game on, so it's called MCH, Maternal Child Health. We built a card game with 110 cards of all the different types of foods that are consumed locally in different regions. And through these cards, women make recipes and food for themselves. So they sit around in a circle, they pretend they're in a market, they take the fruits and vegetables, they prepare what they ate yesterday, what they will eat tomorrow. And what that teaches them, and each food item has the calorific score according to the Fanta and the FAO standards. So this is the first time women in the parts of the state of rural India, in Bihar, in Madhya Pradesh, in other districts, are interacting with what they have eaten, how much calorie they are taking, whether it is something that is keeping the health of their family, their child. Pregnant and lactating women need to eat 6 times a day. And through this game, we're also debunking myths. Like in India, there is a myth which says that the first milk that comes out when the child is born from the mother, which is called colostrum, which is the most important, which is the most important thing that a child can have. What they say that it might not be good, and the only way to test whether it is good or bad is that you have to leave it out in a cup, and if an insect comes and eats it and does not, like, if the insect lives, you can give it to your child. If the insect dies, you can't give it to your child. So children are denied colostrum, and there are so many myths that persist around pregnancy, what you can eat. Say, for example, they do not eat papaya, so throughout their pregnancy they cannot eat papaya. There are certain myths. They say that if you eat coconut, your child will turn out to be fair. So and these myths hamper the dietary and the nutritional capacity of women. It denies them a wide variety of foods that they must eat. But because of these taboos, because of these myths, because of these local factors, they are not eating them. The second thing that we're doing is we're tying it in with all these foods to locally produced goods. So to their kitchen gardens, to wherever. So when they sit around, A, they share recipes with each other. Two, they learn how to keep their sort of calorific intake up to meet their nutritional qualities. They learn diet diversity, which has been set by Fanta, which is the Food Association Nutrition Organization of the FAO. They learn diet diversity, that they should not eat only one type of food, because food diversity is a habit that we're trying to inculcate. So what we are trying to do through the poll, the stories of Antarjal Nagar, Poshan, which is nutrition in Hindi, is that we're trying to develop Indian mechanics derived by our own language. So the poll has the Adda mechanic, which is a conversational one. The Poshan has the Mandi mechanic, which is a very different type of marketplace mechanic than the West. One of the most interesting things I think that Poshan revealed to us, and I think Casper is going to find this very interesting, which is that what regular gaming tells us is that decks have to be ordered and piled on top of each other, and you take the top card from it. That there are neatly packed decks, you take the top card. The Indian mind works through chaos. What we do is we do not like order moving to chaos. We take chaos and move it to order. So you spread cards out for us, and the only way we will truly interact with it is by putting it together. So the way we approach games is backwards. The way we approach neatness is backwards. So in order for us to arrive at using to use games, we need to develop our own narrative of storytelling. We need to first understand the verbs of our own language, how we interact with products, how we interact with stories, how we interact with a wide variety of things, then build those into game mechanics, and then use those storytelling as a mechanic to allow for India to play its own stories, to find its own solutions to its local problems. And that's what we're also trying to achieve at the Civic Games Lab. So that's it from my side. I hope it wasn't boring and it was interesting. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Casper. Thank you, Rushton. And over to you.
Excellent. Abeer, wonderfully interesting and not boring at all, for sure. So as we look at the different things you've talked about, I'm excited for us to move into a series of the subtopics. And I'll have, for our Q&A, I'll have Casper start us off. So Casper, go ahead and start with the first question, if you would.
Great. Thanks so much, Abeer. Also interesting and enlightening for me, and I've learned already previously a bit about your games. So I think it's fascinating how you identify the issues that India has, be it nutrition or civic education. Could you tell us a little bit on how you work to spread these games? I mean, a good idea has to reach the people, right?
Yeah.
Is always someone from the Civic Games Lab traveling across India with the game under his or her arm, or do you have sort of a franchise system? How do you get these games out?
Thank you. Uh, in my speaking points, I had three questions that are exactly linked to what Casper asked. Why do we do this? Does it work? What has been the impact of this methodology? And lastly, what next? So I think those three questions can adequately answer. So the way we take these games are through partnerships. We are a game development and an activation lab. We are a lab because we're not only experimenting in game development, but we are also experimenting in game deployment. So how do you do it? How do you imagine a methodology to deploy games on social issues in India? Because in many ways, we are a small group of people scattered around India, a handful of players. Um, and I think the first question is, how can we develop a methodology? Now, how do we take our games down to the grassroots level is through a series of partnerships. One is that we are supported by a wide variety of organizations, international organizations, and some Indian ones, because the appetite for supporting or even building out this methodology right now is in the West. We are supported by the Frederick Naumann Foundation, we're supported by UNESCO, UNICEF, we are supported by the German embassy, we are supported by a series of international organizations, but we're also uh, and what we do is we also use and partner with local organizations, universities, schools, colleges, CSOs, which are civil society organizations, other NGOs, to give this methodology to the largest number of people. Because right now, game-based learning is deeply urban in India and it's very digital centric. Our games are predominantly cardboard and paper because we believe that the digital spaces, digital games are ones that promote learning in a very absolute way, absolutely, but they're individualistic. Through cardboard and board games, communities sit together, they work around each other, they talk to each other, they break the silos that is not possible with digital games because those are individual personal things. And also, like, unlike in the West, the penetration of broadband and sort of the PC computers, consoles, those small tools that foster larger community is very limited. Ours is a mobile phone, internet based interaction with the thing. And the thing is that the only games that have worked are betting and battle royales like PUBG and fantasy leagues. So those are the two big trends in the Indian digital gaming screen, and moving that is there. So we need to actually go back to physical games. We have to go back to those partnerships. We have to go back to communities. We have to go back to organizations. We have to go back to the smallest unit of people, which is at times could be an SHG, which is a self-help group of 11 women or 10 women who meet every week, deposit money to ensure security for each other, or it could be universities or all of that. So I hope that captures your question.
So building off of that question a bit, one of the things about a digital game is that you are constantly gathering data that allows you to improve the game, right? I'm curious what your iteration methodology is for developing improvements in the physical games that Civic Games Lab creates.
So the game development process is, what we do is a very sort of social science backed and well what we'd say, each game offers its own type of mechanic, its own type of building process, its own type of methodology. So when we think about Poshan, which is the nutrition game, we have a saying in offices that we stand on the shoulders of giants. What we do is we operationalize the existing academic work that is already out there. So we borrow heavily from academia and its observations, its reservations, its limitations, all of that. And in a way, we operationalize that work because that comes with its own set of language, its own ways of interacting. So first we do that. We read. We put together a heavy concept note on what are the ways that one can build. So one game that I didn't talk about is that we're just building a city building game for India, a first of its kind to solve air pollution. So because New Delhi has a huge air pollution problem, so how do we enable young people to think about air pollution and city building? So what is the first thing we did? We looked at SimCity, the sort of pivotal game that was built in the US in the early 90s. And what did it give us? It gave us lessons of what can come out of a city building game. So SimCity gave rise to a new generation of city planners and urban planners. What it did was it allowed people for the first time, regular people, to understand that a city is malleable. So that was the objective and intention that we wanted. Then we read all the research that is there. And we started developing 2 or 3 mechanics of how to play the game. Then we test. We test aggressively for a 3-month period. First, we test prototype 1, prototype 2, prototype 3, prototype 4, and then we print a small quantity of games, and then we go out and play again. So once our mechanics and our messaging and all of that is set, backed by academic work, then we begin the process of designing it. So we'll build out one entire version, and in year 1, that's what we'll do. Then again, we'll play again, feedback will come again, that, and then we'll improve it like a second edition and then a third edition. So that allows us to expand the game, update the artwork, build in all of our learning, and then keep on building it out. So there is a process, there is a malleability, and because the issues change. So for example, we built the poll in 2018. The entire landscape of the country has changed post-COVID. So now we will build the poll for 2024 when India goes into elections. And we'll capture 3 years worth of learning and change it and build it out in a way that captures the feedback.
So fantastic that you bring this methodology together in such a way that allows you to develop such a variety of games. So one of the things that fascinated me about reading about your work is that there are so many different topics that you address with the games. When you think about developing multiple topics and being sensitive to cultural perspectives for how people approach both the topics themselves and gaming about the topics, you're coming from, I assume, a perspective of highly educated, tech savvy, like urban dwelling, right? Person who I'm sure is thinking about the variety there, but hundreds of cultures and languages and all kinds of things across India. What are some of the surprises that for you have been a part of the process of building these games?
The surprises, so there are challenges, and so the biggest surprises are the sort of hurdles that we interact with, the sort of local resistance to get onto a table and talk about things, or even approach gaming as a tangible methodology to understand an issue. So one problem and one limitation and one challenge is that in terms of so I wouldn't look at it as a surprise, I would look at it as a market opportunity. And that is the most exciting thing, right? So I'm not very well versed with American geography, but I know a few states. So when Texas goes into elections, we can build a poll for Texas and capture those specific nuances and idiosyncrasies and all of that for that state. And when New York goes into election, then we have the poll New York. And so it allows us to use that base mechanic, capture the local idiosyncrasies, and build out a new target audience per state. So we don't think of India as a cohesive whole. We all our lives we've been taught not to do it. We have over 4,000 languages. We have a variety of cuisines, but those everyday actions have to remain the same. How do I communicate food to someone? They need to put a plate together, but their dietary habits will change. So we capture those different food items that are grown. But you'll see there'll be staples, there'll be a lot of commonality, and food groups remain the same. But it gives us an opportunity to tweak, readjust, and capture a new audience altogether and understand how to deploy it in that geography. So for example, if we were to do it, our methodology of deployment in a coastal state will be very different from a completely landlocked state. And the language and the metaphors would be very different. So to adjust for that storytelling and this storytelling is very, very exciting. But some of the surprises that would show up, as I was explaining in the poll, in a south state, which is Tamil Nadu, which is deeply patriarchal, but also has a long history of social justice, where men have challenged well-established hierarchical formats of caste. The idea of politics is very negotiation and transactional there, but women are kept out of it. So when we took the poll to Tamil Nadu, the men were like, bah, we see this every day. But when women encountered this sort of safe space to play games and to imagine their politics through it, they took it to like water, and they argued and they discussed, they put forward their own vision of the world, and it was absolutely stellar. Um, in when it comes to Poshan, we have at least 6 types of spinach in India. And so in the mountains, you will eat something called lal sag, which is red spinach. But in a tribal state, you will approach spinach differently. And in a coastal state, you will approach spinach differently, but it's spinach.
Fantastic. I know that we're going to continue this conversation after we finish the recording, because one of the perks of being part of these recordings, and that those announcements go out to our members and our special list of guests who want to know when we're doing these, is that we just keep getting to talk to these interesting people. So before I hand it back to Abeer for the final word, I would like to say to our guests, thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed the conversation, that the ideas are intriguing to you, that they're the kinds of things you might take back to your own groups to talk about innovative ways to address challenging problems that may be faced in your own communities. Let us know you were here. A little farther down the page, you'll see a form that allows you to say, I was here. You input your email address, and by typing that in correctly, you'll get a reply that you can pass along to your club secretary to make up a miss at your Rotary Club if you are trying to do such a thing. Additionally, towards the bottom of the page, you'll find our Discuss forum, which is one of the ways we in an online and asynchronous Rotary Club share ideas, and we interact with each other and find out the kinds of things that are on the minds of our colleagues across the world in this global club. So we hope that we will hear from you. We hope that you will hear what we have to say, what we have to read we've provided for you on the site, and share your thoughts so that you can become part of this community as well. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. So Abeer, I hand it back to you.
Thank you. Well, final words are really difficult because what we do is iterative and constantly evolving and moving, and we're trying to find new solutions. But coming back to the question, and I will use the last thing that you asked about how do we solve for so many issues or try to build for this variegated set of climate change, democracy, all of that, and what are we, well, looking to achieve? Well, we're looking to achieve an active citizenry. And for the longest time, there has been a gulf between what political action is and how citizens are interacting with it. There is a certain passivity that has moved into our public culture, which only sort of comes alive during, well, the activeness comes alive during elections or periods of political tumult. But asking for your rights, negotiating for your rights, working together is a, well, year-long, lifelong process. When I present in India, we vote every 5 years. We vote one day out of the other 1835 or 40 or 50 days. But what happens to our right as citizens, or what happens to our duties as those citizens over those 1800 days? So through games, we are trying to develop this fun, interactive, slightly difficult, but well, rewarding methodology, which helps us become citizens throughout the 5 year process. That we develop and strengthen our civic muscle through civic games, through games of social import, through games that help us imagine a better world, through games that give us a vocabulary for a better world, or for those everyday actions that we can take to reduce our carbon emissions, to come to terms with how we can fight populism and fascism, how we can show empathy and provide care to people, how we can change our diet in small, small ways, how we can do all of that, how we can look after our cities. And through these games, we find one that I think these games will be waiting to be made in India. And it's a miracle why they haven't been made. And it's also like absurd luck that I have found myself in this little niche and gap. So that has been exciting. But it is the deployment of these, the creation of these, the usage of these, and the expansion of these that will, in many ways, help build a counter to the unidirectionality of the one-way conversation that politicians, newspapers, everyone is having with us. The unidirectionality has to come to an end, and we need to embrace the methodologies of interaction, of games, of interactive storytelling to provide a vocabulary to the most pressing issues of our time, to spur an active citizenship that can help us build a better tomorrow. So that is my message.
Excellent. Abeer, thank you so very much. And for all of you who are joining us on this recording, thank you. We will see you next week.